Hi there, in this video I want to talk about what has gone wrong with Britain. And actually, I've seen it happen over the course of my life. I'm aged 40, so if you cut my life right in the middle, the year is 2005, I'm aged 20, I'm at university, Blair's just won a third landslide. And if we look back over that 20 years, up to my 20th birthday, Britain was doing really well, and it was doing really well for working people. Over the period 1985 to 2005, wages had grown by 68%, and people were really feeling it. The 1990s into the noughties felt like a period where Britain was on the up. But of course, if we then look at the second half of my life, things stopped going to plan. Wage growth in this second period wasn't 68%, it wasn't even 10%, it was 6%. And in fact, had wage growth continued on the trajectory it was in the first half of my life, up to today, the average salary in the UK, not some mega salary, but the average salary in the UK, would be £51,000. As it is, the average salary is only £31,000. In other words, had things continued to be like they were in the first half of my life, everybody in Britain would be richer, on average, by £20,000 a year. So that's how serious things have shifted in Britain. But what is causing this problem, and what is the solution? In this video, I want to investigate this question and try and work out what the hell's gone wrong over the past 20 years and what we can do to fix it. So for ordinary people, for working people, what we've seen over the last 20 years is stagnant wage growth. But what we've also seen over my lifetime is a massive increase in the amount of wealth in the British economy. So if we go back to the 1980s, the total amount of wealth in the economy was about 3 times GDP. And now it's 7.5 times GDP. So wealth has more than doubled over that 40-year period. So we live in a society where people are getting wealthier, but where people who work for their money are not getting richer. And what that means is that the economy is becoming increasingly imbalanced, so that people who already have money, who already have assets, are able to see their assets grow through asset appreciation, made worse obviously by things like quantitative easing. During the pandemic, for example, and during the banking crisis, people's assets really grew in value. But of course, the bigger problem is that if you have wealth, it's going to generate you a passive income stream of what we like to call unearned income. So people who work for their money are seeing their wages are stagnant over a 20-year period, but as wealth grows, there is more unearned income in our economy. And what that means fundamentally is that there is an imbalance in our society towards those who already have wealth and away from those who work hard for their money. So many people would be inclined to say that the big reason why Britain is struggling at the moment is because of Brexit. Now, of course, that's not absent. By leaving the European Union, Britain cut itself off from its biggest trading partners, and of course that's going to have an impact. Maybe about 5% of the productivity gap is caused by Brexit. But the rest of it is down to more long-standing problems with the British economy, and specifically with a failure in Britain for enough investment to be going into things such as infrastructure and capital. What this means is that British workers are less well-resourced, there's less infrastructure, there's less capital, and that means that the output that we get per unit of input is going to be diminished. And so the solution to this is for Britain to invest more, and what that's going to need is for Britain to get over this idea that we can't possibly invest without putting up taxes. It's important that we understand that investment doesn't require taxation. The government can borrow if it invests in things that create value in the future, because when the government invests, when it buys up an asset, that asset is going to generate a return. And so one of the biggest failures that I've seen in my lifetime was just after the financial crisis, when interest rates were really, really low, rather than using that as an opportunity to massively increase investment, to engage in necessary spending, what actually happened was austerity. We delayed necessary spending. That made many of the problems worse and actually increased the bill for the future. Now look, the Labour Party are investing more than previous governments. They are trying to cut through red tape to make sure that when governments and the private sector do want to invest, that they're able to do so, that they're not trapped in a labyrinthine planning system that makes it far more costly to invest in Britain than maybe anywhere else in the world. So this government are starting to deal with the problems, but the problem is that Britain's just so far behind with all of this and has done so much self-inflicted damage, particularly through austerity, that it is going to take a while for us to deal with the problems that have been created. We also have quite a unique problem in Britain, which is that we have London, the city of London, which is way out ahead in terms of GDP, in terms of productivity than the rest of the country. And so what really needs to happen is that imbalance needs to be addressed. There needs to be lots of investment in the nations and regions to bring the British economy back into balance. And all of these things are going to take time. They're not going to be dealt with soon. And at the same time, of course, the government needs to address the wealth inequality that exists within our society. Because if you've got lots of wealth in society, and if working people are not able to make a decent income, that's going to put things like houses out of the reach of ordinary, hardworking people. And it's also going to mean that there's lots of money being made in the economy, but it's not being made through productive activity, through working, through producing. It's being made through passive income, through people simply sitting on assets. And this is not a good thing for the economy. It also means that the economy is fundamentally exploitative, because it means that those who have wealth are getting their income from the hard work of other people. So the big concern I have in all of this is that the economic situation, the fact that we have a cost of living crisis which is structurally embedded within our economy, is leading to the rise of populist parties on the right, and Nigel Farage and Reform are doing very well in the polls. They're currently 10 to 15 points ahead, and if there was an election tomorrow, they would easily win, and they'd potentially have a majority, maybe even a landslide majority. Now, my concern about that is many-fold, but let's just focus on the economics for a second. So even if you leave aside all of the other problems that I have with Reform becoming our government, I just don't think they understand the fundamental economic problems in our society. They're not going to do anything about wealth inequality. They're not going to do enough about regional inequality. And because Nigel Farage at his core is a Thatcherite, we're going to see more cuts and more austerity, which is exactly the opposite of what the British economy needs, and is going to worsen all of the problems in Britain and potentially lead to dangerous consequences. As inequalities and divisions get worse in societies, then that opens the door to dark political outcomes. So I'm really worried about that possibility, and I really want people watching this video to really think about the next election as a bit of a tipping point election where we've really got to get things right. I am a member of the Green Party at the moment. I don't think they're going to win the next election, but what we do need to do is to put pressure on the Labour Party, to put pressure on whoever is in power to try and deal with these fundamental problems so that we don't take yet another misstep, making our problems worse. Unfortunately, the way things are at present, I don't see things getting better anytime soon, and I remain very pessimistic. And what I'd like in the comments, actually, is for people to, rather than agreeing with me, maybe give me some cause to be optimistic, right? So if you're going to comment on this video, try not to agree with me. Try and say, I think you're being a bit too pessimistic. Here's something to be positive about. So I'll leave it there. Goodbye and best wishes.